So again, welcome to the Title I Part D Subpart 2 Monitoring Training Overview. Here is our agenda for the day. A couple things just to start out, some logistical things. I don't know how familiar all of you are with Microsoft Teams, but there's a chat feature that it should be, there's either going to be a black ribbon at the top of your screen or at the bottom, and there's a little chat icon. So please feel free at any time you have a question or you're wondering something, use that chat. And as a matter of fact, we'll use it here in a moment as well. And I'll do my best to respond to things as we go through. And Monica, thank you so much for joining us. And those of you that we may not have met yet, I'm Wes Blake, and I'm the Title I Part D Subpart 2 consultant. And I'm here with my colleague Monica Higgins, who's also a Title I Part D consultant. She works primarily with Subpart 1 programs.
And it's a pleasure to see everybody virtually. Thank you.
And so that is one great thing about I know it's maybe not the funnest thing in the world to be monitored, but I know there's some work that goes into it. But I do enjoy meeting you all and kind of learning about the great things that you're doing with your programs and for your students. So I am looking forward to getting out and meeting some of you. I got to meet some folks last year as well. But let's start off here. So in that chat option there, if you would, mention any questions that you have about monitoring. So is there anything you're wondering or anything that you'd like to know? Go ahead and put that in the chat there. And also, if you would, if you could share your role. So are you a teacher? Are you a finance officer? Are you a principal? Your years of experience with Title I-D. And again, you can also in one message just put any questions that you have about monitoring in there. So while you're kind of working on that, the overview today, it's going to be pretty short and sweet. I want to review the monitoring purpose with you all, show you all the resources that you have to help you prepare. Some of those are going to be on the KDE website and some are on the Google Class. There's a monitoring frequently asked questions and tips document that we'll kind of go over together. And then lastly, we've got a new monitoring checklist that I wanted to review with everyone. And then we'll save time at the end for any questions that you all have. So that's the plan for the day. And let me check, is there anybody they need to admit? Let's see, there's a couple folks in the lobby. Go ahead and admit there. Okay. Okay, so let's start there. I'm going to look at the chat to see if you all do have any questions so far. Okay, and I see, okay, no questions. Principal 3-year, Rodney. Hello, Rodney. Hello. Hi, Alma. First year in Title I Part D. And Alma, I actually was just emailing you earlier this morning. Good to see you. Good to see you, Marcy. Yeah, and we'll cover everything. Marcy, I see, any questions you have at the end, please ask. But we'll go ahead and jump right in, and feel free as we're going through, any questions you have, put them in there. Monica, if you happen to see any that, please stop me and I'll address them.
I certainly will, Wes. I'll help you monitor the chat.
Thank you. So let's take a look first at what the purpose is. And Monica, if you don't mind, if you see anybody joining in the lobby, would you mind admitting them, please?
No, not at all, Wes.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So let's talk about the purpose. What is the purpose of monitoring? Why do we do it? So the Kentucky Department of Education, or KDE, is required to monitor Title I Part D Subpart 2 program implementation. And this is part of the responsibility for Title I Part D that's authorized under the Elementary and Secondary Education Act of 1965. So that's kind of the statutory requirement there. So what is the purpose of doing it beyond that? So while this process does ensure compliance, it also provides helpful technical assistance, recommendations to make your programs even better, and also recognizing all the outstanding efforts that are already occurring with your Title I Part D programs. So that's the focus. And what we really look for is we look for compliance, yes. We look for places where there's recommendations that we may have seen with other programs to help you do things, make your programs even stronger. And then, of course, we look for all the great things that you're already doing. So that's the purpose there. As far as what resources are there out there for you all to have for monitoring, let's take a look at that together. I'm just going to Title 1 Part D. I'm just searching KDE Title 1 Part D. I just searched that in Google and the Title 1 Part D Subpart 2 KDE page came up there. So if you'll notice on the main page here, on the right are all your resources. So you've got, your main overviews like your handbook and your overview, your application. And if you scroll down a little bit, you'll see the monitoring resources. So, and folks, as you're joining, if you don't mind, if you can mute your microphones for now, that'll help the sound quality for folks that are listening. So some of the resources that are here for monitoring, you've got the monitoring checklist, and that's brand new. We're going to walk through that together. We've got a monitoring PowerPoint that walks you through the process as well. There's a monitoring webinar, much like the one that we're doing right now, that you can view. And of course, we're going to provide this webinar that we're doing right now. I'm going to provide a copy of that to everyone after as well. Also, there's a navigating SharePoint for monitoring. So SharePoint is probably going to be new to a lot of folks, possibly. Maybe not, but if it is new to you, that video walks you through how to use SharePoint. And SharePoint is to Microsoft what Google Docs is to Google. So I know I was a teacher for 8 years, and Google is more often used in school systems, so you may not be as familiar with SharePoint. So that might be helpful right there. So again, all of these, you can just Google the phrase KDE Title 1 Part D. Make sure you go to the Subpart 2 page here, and your related resources are at the right side of the page, and your monitoring resources are here towards the bottom. So those are there for you as you're going through this process. So let's look at some of the resources that are on Google Classroom related to monitoring. And Monica, any questions that are coming in that I should pause for before I jump into this?
So far, there's not any questions, Wes, but we do have several people that are in attendance, and we really appreciate you joining us today to talk about monitoring. So thank you.
Yes, we appreciate your time, folks, very much. And we know how busy everyone is. All
Yes.
right. So this is the Google Classroom page for Title 1 Part D Subpart 2. And if you're not a member of this already and you'd like to be, reach out to me. Just send me an email, or a matter of fact, if you just want to type in the chat here, whichever is easiest, either one will work. And let me know you'd like to be added, and I'll add you today to the site. But you'll notice here, some of you are probably familiar with Google Classroom. It starts off at the stream. You want to go to that classwork tab to really get into the content there. So at the top, there's a place for us to collaborate. If you have successes or challenges or just questions that you want to talk with folks running, other Title I Part D programs throughout the state, this is a great place to share those. If you want to share something anonymously and have a question that you'd like for me to reach out to other folks, feel free to email me and I'll post it anonymously for you. So I'm happy to do that. We've done that before. I do not mind at all. Here's some basic things. I won't linger there since we're focusing on monitoring today, but you can see we come to monitoring. I always try to keep the most relevant items at the top there. And you can see there's a monitoring training overview. This is last year's version of what we're doing today. This frequently asked question, we're going to review this today together. Here's the new checklist we're going to review today. And then these 3 resources, the SharePoint, navigating SharePoint guide and the monitoring PowerPoint and the monitoring webinar, these are the same ones that you're going to see on the KDE site. So just another way for you all to reference those when you need them. So let's go ahead and jump into the frequently asked questions and tips here. check. All right. So we've already talked about what the purpose is, and how is this on your all's end? Is this viewable? Is this legible, or the print okay?
I think it's okay, Wes. We can see it.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
So we've talked about the purpose there. So let's move into the second most frequently asked question here. And I think if I was if I was a coordinator, this is one that I would really want to pay close attention to, because I think it can be helpful. So what are the most common findings, and how can I proactively work to address them, right? So a couple of the most common findings include the following. So number one, probably the most common one that we see is a lack of alignment between Munis and the approved GMAP application. And so that's the number one most common one. So what I mean by this is there'll be expenditures on the Munis that maybe they're different amounts or different purchases that are not on the GMAP application, right? So you want to make sure those are aligned. And I'll kind of talk about some ways you can do that. The second one that we see the most is time and effort logs for staff paid with Title I funds are not maintained. So this just means when you have staff that are paid with Title I funds, whether it be Title I Part A or Title I Part D, you want to make sure you're maintaining those time and effort logs. So that's the other one we see the most often. So how do you proactively address these most common findings? So what you can do, expenditures, make sure that they align with the approved application in GMAP. So if changes need to occur, if your needs change, and you need to purchase different things than you had on your application, simply revise your application in GMAP. You want to make sure that your district regularly coordinates with their chief finance officer and aligns that GMAP application with the actual spending that's happening as reflected in Munis. So remember, an important thing to keep in mind here, that GMAP application can be revised at any time. As a general rule of thumb, you want to, we recommend that you at least align that quarterly. Okay. And so that's how to address that lack of alignment between Munis and the approved GMAP application. As far as addressing the time and effort logs and making sure that that's maintained for staff that are paid with Title I Part D funds, you just want to make sure that your regular time and effort logs are maintained that measure after the fact the time and effort of employees paid with Title I funds. A couple of examples of time and effort logs that meet requirements are included on page 27 in our Title I Part D handbook. And I'll email this guide out to you all after this, so you have access to all this as well. So another question, monitoring takes place. Monitoring takes place. We're required to monitor all our programs once every 3 years. So, but in 3 years, it's whether you're new or whether you've been there for a while, you may be wondering what the process is like. So before the monitoring visit, the way that it works, between November and December, the district will be notified and will schedule the monitoring visit. So we'll reach out to the district, and let them know that the monitor that it's there. They're up in the monitoring timeline, and so we'll schedule the monitoring visit, and then at least 2 weeks prior to that scheduled visit, the district should upload required documentation from the monitoring checklist. So we're going to go through that in a moment, but this will be uploaded to SharePoint. We ask that information and that documentation is Microsoft Word or PDF documents and not Google Doc links. And this is due to accessibility issues, just to make sure that we're able to view all that important evidence that of all the things that you're doing with your program. So don't worry about uploading items that are already documented on GMAP, like the program planner application, the needs assessment, the interagency agreement, the signed assurances, things like that are in GMAP already. You don't need to worry about uploading again. We won't ask you to do that. Another thing that's important to keep in mind, personal identifiable information should not be uploaded on the SharePoint site. So, student names, emails, social security numbers, things like that. You want to make sure that you redact that information and that that's not uploaded to SharePoint. So You've been notified, you've 2 weeks prior, you've uploaded the evidence according to the checklist. What does the monitoring visit itself look like? So the monitoring discussion generally follows the monitoring checklist, and we'll look at this in one moment, but that's the structure of it. We kind of go through those and look at those things that are on the checklist. The purpose is simply to find evidence that meets indicator requirements. So we're looking for evidence before the monitoring visit. We're just looking for evidence that you're meeting requirements. And then during the interview, during the actual monitoring visit, we're also just looking for evidence. So we're just looking for evidence that these things are happening in your programs to make sure that your programs are compliant. And so we also want to learn about the great things that you're currently doing in your program and find any areas that may be improved. So those are really the 3 big items that we're focusing on there. As far as the schedule, this is a general tentative schedule. We like to start around 9 a.m. Eastern time, and for about the first hour and a half, we like to meet at the central office, and we'll interview and conduct document review with district contacts and the facility contact and the transition coordinator. And then for the last 15 minutes or so at the central office, we like to bring in the finance officer. And so with the finance officer, we'd like to discuss the questions on the checklist that relate to the budget, the munis report, the time and effort logs, and the purchase orders, and those sort of things. So we'd like to in order to save the finance officer's time, we like to bring them in just for those items that relate to what they're doing. And then from about 11:30 to 12:30-ish, at the facility, we like to see the facility and have a tour and possibly interview some teachers and students as we don't want to be disruptive, but at the same time, we would like to interview the students and teachers as circumstances allow in a least disruptive way. We also like to talk with the district contacts and facility contacts and transition coordinator while we're there at the facility. And so then, build in some time for lunch there. And then typically we'll meet back at the central office for a debriefing with district contact, the facility contact, the finance officer, and the transition coordinator. So that debriefing, really we just kind of talk, it's kind of informal. And we won't have, we want to go back and review all the evidence before we have any concrete information, but we do like to at least mention some things that we've seen that some strengths and the next steps that we'll take. And again, this is not set in stone. This is flexible, but this is just the general outline there. So what about after the monitoring visit? So after the monitoring visit is over, the district has 1 week to provide any requested evidence. So if there's some requirements that we haven't seen evidence for yet, we like to give the district a week to provide any evidence that they may have to show that they're meeting that requirement. And then within 4 to 6 weeks, a report will be prepared and emailed to the district. So the report may include strengths, findings, and/or recommendations. So a finding is a required action that helps guide a district to become compliant. A recommendation is not required. It's simply a recommendation for how a program can get even better. So one thing to remember, and we've been monitored here at KDE, the U.S. Department of Ed monitors us. So we've been in your shoes, and we kind of understand how you feel. Just to kind of set some realistic expectations, the way anything that's not compliant, we will help you become compliant. So if there's a piece of the monitoring checklist and a requirement for the statute that's not being met, we'll guide you and we'll give you a timeline, and we'll work with you to help you meet that requirement. So this is it's not at all a gotcha. It's just we just look for strengths recommendations. Anything that's not compliant, we will work with you to help you get compliant. So that's just kind of to set kind of the expectation there for what to expect. So We've kind of talked about this already about the monitoring resources, but they're here for you again. So you've got the checklist, the PowerPoint, the webinar. Of course, we'll provide this as well. I feel like I've been talking a while. Do you all have any new questions come up? Thing you all are
So,
wondering?
so far, Wes, there's not any questions within the chat.
Okay. All right. Well, folks, let me walk you through the new monitoring checklist. So this is what's going to guide the evidence that you upload and the conversation that we have and our look fors. So all of this is aligned to the statute. So the statute, the Universal Grant Guidelines, the Edgar guidelines, all this is aligned with that. So you can see the Subpart 2 purpose from the statute. This kind of walks you through some of our, our next steps, that we were just talking about when to expect a report. And another thing too that may be helpful to know too, your report, your monitoring report or actions needed report that we provide is that's not public. That's just provided. That's provided directly to the district, and it's not made public. So that may be something that you may be wondering. But first section here, there are 5 sections. The first section is about the LEA plan and the administration, and all of this aligns with section 1423 of ESSA. And you can kind of see the structure of this. You've got what's the requirement, from the statute and what information is requested. So you can kind of see here, the requirement is that each LEA, local education agency, AKA district, will submit a description of the program to be assisted, and you can see where this is coming from ESSA there. And so the suggested documentation here is documentation of program statistics like length of stay data, overview of staff, instruction, data about number of students. So here's some questions that we might talk about at the in-person monitoring. And this box here, LEA facility response, this is a space for you to just kind of comment on, your program that's being assisted. And this other box here is for the district or facility. Any information that you've uploaded to SharePoint, you can type the name of the document there. Therefore, it just makes it really easy to see that you provided evidence that meets this requirement. And that just kind of makes things a little bit more clear that your program's compliant. So you can kind of see there are 7 indicators in this first section. And the second section is focusing on program requirements for the correctional facility receiving funds. And that aligns with section 1425 of ESSA. And you can kind of see you've got the same structure here. What is the requirement per the statute? What's the documentation that you can upload to SharePoint to show that you're meeting that? And then it gives you a response just to kind of have a brief narrative here or explanation. And you can also mention any documentation that you've uploaded. You can mention the file name. So it's really clear that you're meeting that. So this section here, this is the longest section. There's 9 indicators here. And then there's some best practices of things that programs can do. And then we go into the third section here. This is focusing on use of funds, section 1424 of ESSA. And again, you've got the same structure. What's the requirement? What documentation can show that you're meeting it, right? Here's your narrative you can put in the name of the document that you've uploaded. This is a shorter section. I want to say, if memory serves, I think there's just 3 or 4 here. Yeah, there's just 4 indicators for this third section, use of funds. And then we go into the second to last section. This focuses on program evaluation, section 1431 of ESSA. And again, you've got that same structure. What's the requirement for the statute? What evidence can show that it's being met, right? A narrative that you can provide and the name of the file that you're uploading to SharePoint. So it's really clear that you're meeting that. And again, that's a shorter section there too. There's 4 indicators there. And again, just to kind of reiterate the process a little bit here and how it relates to the checklist. So this checklist, you will have, and that this will guide the documentation that you upload to SharePoint 2 weeks before the visit. And during the monitoring visit, our discussion will, your consultant, whether it be Monica or I, will have a chance to review this, and then we'll just talk about it, and you'll kind of be able to provide more evidence about how you're meeting it, right? And so our interview in person will just go through this. So there's really not a huge element of surprise, right? This is kind of what you can expect. Okay, so the last section here is fiscal management. This focuses on part 76 and 200 of Edgar. So this is all focusing on, this is the part that we'd want to talk to the finance officer about, that talks about, obligations and expenditures consistent with the approved GMAP application, right? Here is where we're looking for these requirements here about staff and time and effort documentation. So that's the final section there. And that's really the main things that I wanted to go over with everybody. What are you all thinking? What questions do you have? And feel free to unmute your mics if you just want to verbally ask a question, that's totally fine. Or you can type in the chat. I'll give
Mr.
you a
Blake.
minute. Yes.
Hi, I'm sorry to interrupt. I'm Rodney McInich. I'm at Pulaski Schools, and this is my first year. So I recall this past summer, Ms. Higgins actually helped with a finding that we had. Got that corrected. I guess my question is, and maybe I misunderstood. So we're monitored at least once every 3 years, or is this an annual event?
Yeah, no, good question, Rodney. And please, thank you. Anyone that needs to speak, please feel free. We'll have a conversation. I'm tired of hearing myself talk. I can't imagine how you all feel at this time. But no, Rodney, good question. So it's a 3-year cycle. So the statute requires that the KDE and state education agencies monitor Title I Part D, Subpart 2 once every 3 years. So it'll be a 3-year rotation. Good question.
And also, Wes, we did have a question come in the chat. It says, what does the time and effort sheet look like? I was looking on the website and couldn't find an example.
Yeah, absolutely. Great question, Marcy. Let's take a look at that right now. And I'm going to send this. I'm going to send this to you all as well after this meeting, so you'll have it. And Marcy, I will say too, I know that Jessamine was just monitored. I think it was last year, Monica. Am I remembering that right?
Yes, that is correct.
And for Title I Part A, it was a consolidated monitoring. And Marcy, I know that folks at your district level, like I know we worked with Michelle, and some folks would have that, and your finance officer as well. I know they would have that. I'm pretty sure we were speaking to them about that as well. So they would have that information as well. But this is a good question. Let's take a look at it. So I'm going to go to the Title I Part D handbook. The way I'm going here, it's on the frequently asked question page. You can go there, but let me show you how to go there just in case you're going there out of the blue, just so you'll kind of know what I'm doing here. I'm just doing a Google search for KDE, Title I Part D, and Title I Part D Subpart 2 came up. And so I'm going to go to the related resources, and I'm going to click on the very first resource, the Title I Part D handbook. And so page 27 is where that's sending us to. So let's take a look. Let's take a look together.
And also, Wes, while you're taking a look at it, I hate to keep cutting you off, but we do have another follow-up question from Marcia Smith. She asks, do we need to have the form filled out even if we aren't having a visit this year, or is it just for the visit?
So Marcy, do you mean, and feel free to unmute if you want to, Marcy. Do you mean the form? Do you mean the time and effort, or do you mean the actual monitoring checklist form?
The time and effort. I just didn't know if this was only for these meetings or should this be something we have filled out every year and kind of on file? It's kind of the first I've heard of this form, so I just want to make sure to accurately do what I need to do here.
Sure, absolutely, Marcy. No, good question. So the time and effort, you want to have that in place all the time, ongoing. So I would say probably, so Marcy, what you want to do, like, so here's page 27 of the handbook here. Hold on one second. I don't have my mouse today, so I'm just going old school on the laptop, and it keeps giving me trouble. Okay, so you do want to keep that going, all the time. So just to give you a, here's what I really want. I'm going to show you this in a moment. So for example, I'm paid with Title I funds as well. So I work with, and this information kind of covers it, I work with one cost objective. So I work on Title I all the time. So I'm 100% paid by Title I funds. Therefore, what I do is I have to fill out, a semi-annual certification, right? So we typically do it in January, we do it in July. And basically, I'll show you a form, and it's really similar to what we do. And so you just want to maintain that. And best practice, I would think, would be just to have a process where these time and effort requirements are universal across all Title I programs. So any Title I Part A staff is doing the same thing. So it would be best practice just to have a uniform practice at the district. And so I would reach out to your Title I-A director as well and kind of talk about, what you're doing across the board and just make sure that Title I Part D is aligning with that. But I'm going to get to your question here to show you the example here. So just everyone that's kind of, if you want to look this up on your own, just to kind of let you know what I'm up to. Page 27 kind of walks you through the time and effort requirements. And so another thing to keep in mind, if it's someone who's 100% paid, like one cost objective, like there's a teacher, for example, that's only doing Title I Part D. They work with Title I Part D all the time, right? So they're 100% paid for that. Then they would do a semi-annual certification. I'll show you that. However, if you've got somebody that's half the time they work with Title I Part D and half the time, they're paid with general funds because they're not working with Title I Part D, then that would be a different type of certification form. And I'll show you the difference right now. We'll take a look at that together. But on page 30, there's a Title I Part D sample documents folder. So I'm clicking on that right now. And so here is the so a PAR, personal activity report template. Let's take a look at that. So this is what you want to do. A monthly PAR is an example of something that meets requirements for documenting time and effort for someone that's paid with more than one program. So again, this is a teacher or this is staff that's working with Title I Part D maybe half the time, but they're working with general programs the rest of the time, right? So for them, you would want to do something like this, where you have a monthly PAR, where each month you document, how many hours they're working with each program, total hours per day. And that would be done monthly, excuse me. And then you've got an important detail of this requirement is that, you've got someone with knowledge of the work that the person is doing. So the direct supervisor that is also signing off and acknowledging that this is happening. So this is an example of time and effort documentation that would meet requirements for someone that's working for more than one program. And let me show you an example of the semi-annual certification. And this is an example of time and effort that meets requirements if somebody's 100% Title I staff, okay? So you can see here, it's a little bit easier. You just have to do this twice a year, hence semi-annual. but you've got the employee kind of acknowledging here that they're working 100% with the program. You've got the employee signature and then the supervisor's signature and then date there. So that's does that answer your question, Marcy? I felt like that was long-winded, but it's a detailed question, an important question.
Yes. So, and just to be 100% sure,
Mhm.
people will only be looking at this once every 3 years when they come for the audit, but I should be having these documents on file every year, including the years they're not visiting.
Yes,
Correct.
that is correct.
And I don't do
Yes.
anything with them on the years they're not visiting. It's only, I mean, other than keep them, but I don't
Y-
send them anywhere. It's just when I'm visited that somebody will see those.
Correct.
Yes,
Okay,
that's
gotcha. Thanks,
correct.
guys. I appreciate the help there.
Yeah,
You're
no, good
welcome.
question, Marcy. And that this is, like I said, it's an important question because this is one of the most common findings that we see. So it's definitely worth your attention. And like you said, yeah, you just want to make sure that you're doing this regularly and you're just documenting it. So if you have a Google folder, where you're documenting this that you're doing, that's what you want to do. Good question. Thank you, Marcy. And anybody else? Any other questions? Anything else that you all are kind of wondering or wanting to know?
So, Wes, I'm not seeing any other questions pop up within the chat.
Okay. Well, folks, thank you so much for your time. I know how busy everyone is, and Happy New Year to everybody. And I really do look forward to meeting folks in person. Especially after the pandemic, we were kind of limited with that. But I hope you all are doing well. If you need help, if you have questions that you think of after the fact, please reach out to me. I appreciate your all's hard work, and let us know how we can support you. And thank you all for joining us today.
Thank you,
Take care.
everybody.